In order to play the Leningrad Dutch properly, one first of all needs to understand the typical structures. There are some fourth lines one has to know, but mainly that Leningrad Dutch is about structures, about plans, long maneuvering, sometimes specific piece development. Knight goes to a6, queen on e8, and I believe that in order to systematize the material better, we have to think that rather than a hybrid between the Dutch and the King's Indian, the Leningrad Dutch is meant to be an improved King's Indian. Why improved? Because in the King's Indian, black frequently attacks the center with e5, and then depending on white's reactions, you should later have to remove the knight from f6 and play f5 and probably return with the knight on f6 in order to put pressure on e4. Obviously, if black manages to play e5 under favorable circumstances, having played f5, f7, f5 before knight f6 would simply spare him two tempis. This, of course, looks very nice, but there are several problems on the way. First of all, black is one tempo behind in development with respect to the King's Indian. Secondly, not always the presence of the pawn on f5 is such a favorable circumstance. Sometimes the tandem e5, f5 may become weak. Sometimes the e6 square can be invaded by the white minor pieces. So I would first of all try to explain to examine very briefly the three main King's Indian structures that may arise also in the Leningrad Dutch, with the difference that the pawn is on f5. I will first speak about the blocked positions, which are so typical for the King's Indian, when white answers e5 with d5 immediately or a few moves later. We have, since in the Leningrad Dutch, white almost always plays g3 and bishop g2. The best reference point is this variation, the Yugoslav attack against the fianchetto, and we have this as one of the main lines for both sides, and now e5. Of course, black can play e5 in several moments, and of course, well, let's first of all let us not think about d takes e6. That is possible all the times, but let us speak about this position statically. Imagine that the center is always blocked and it stays like this. Obviously, with the pawn on f5, black would be in a better situation than he is here. Generally, if the center is blocked, if white blocks the center, he does not have real problems in real chances for an advantage in the Dutch. But we see that there are also exceptions. Secondly, we have a typical King's Indian structure, which I would call the Zurich structure. It was rehearsed in several games of the famous Zurich-Neuhausen Candidates Tournament in 1953. It was maybe some sort of official international baptizing of the King's Indian. Black did not stick to his own central pawn, and he aims for piece pressure, some sort of hedgehog structure. Well, now this line is not very popular anymore, but black plays e takes d4 in several other moments. But let us compare it with the Leningrad Dutch. Well, with the pawn on f5, it's obvious that white cannot have his pawn on e4, not at the first moment. So there are some differences. Statically, black may be better than here, but dynamically he may be a tempo down. And if white manages to carry out e2, e4 anyway, then the position may open to white's advantage. And secondly, the third structure is when white exchanges on e5. There is a variation which has been popular for a while, but generally in the King's Indian, white has little chances for an advantage. Recently, there have been even games with this line. White has obtained some slight advantage out of the opening, but generally speaking, giving up the control of the d4 square without any concrete black weaknesses is not so. I don't consider it so promising. Of course, if the black pawn would be on f5, like in the Dutch defense, then things would be different. This continuous tension in the center could lead to either a block position with f4, and then black could have some attacking chances, or to Isolani in case black plays f takes e4, or white plays e takes f5, followed by bishop takes f5. Or the hanging pawns if e takes f5 is answered with g takes f5. And finally, we have another way of reaching structures with d takes e5 when white refrains from e to e4. Well, this line is not very dangerous for black, but some players like it for white. White would play queen c1, rook d1, maybe knight g5, knight e4. There is some better development for white, and black's slight advantage of space is somehow hindered by the fact that he has no obvious way to complete his development, especially that of the c8 bishop. But at the same time, if the pawn would be on f5, like in the Dutch defense, then white would have absolutely nothing, because e4 would come and black would have a nice space advantage, and the g2 bishop would be out of play. So this would be not dangerous for black. Now that we have spoken about the possible structures arising from the King's Indian, we will start examining one by one the similar structures from the Leningrad Dutch.